Alright, if you haven't sharpened that pencil yet, it's been a while, get the sharpener and sharpen that pencil. Okay, so we want to talk 2-point perspective. We already talked 1 point. So the only difference between 1 point and 2-point perspective, it just means now that we have 2 vanishing points. Wow. Wow. Most of the drawing that you'll probably do is going to be some version of 2-point drawing. Every once in a while 3-point, but most of it is 2-point drawing. The first thing you do, for the most part, when you're doing 2-point drawings is you try to find the nearest side. Once you find the nearest side, then you can start drawing to your vanishing points to find your convergence. There are a number of times where we may draw things inside of boxes because boxes are by far the easiest thing to figure out the convergence of perspective and vanishing points. We put cylinders, we put spheres, we put almost everything inside of a cube because it's easier to figure out the construction of it. So once we draw to our vanishing points, we just decide on how deep we want our cube to be, and then we draw the lines that effectively make up the other parts. You do not need to draw any of the hidden parts of these cubes. You're only drawing the visible parts. So once again, you find the nearest part, you draw your vertical line, and then all of the other lines converge. The difference between 1-point and 2-point perspective is now you have 2 sides of your objects that converge to vanishing points. In 1-point perspective, you only have one side that converges to a vanishing point. That's how you'll quickly and easily know the difference. Practicing drawing this, oftentimes, again, it's a matter of I want to find where my nearest side is, and then I'm going to then draw my converging lines, and then I'm going to find where my object stops. And that's how I would easily determine the depth on my objects. And then after that, I'll just go back in and add the thickness on it to make sure I have the line weights so that create the readability that I want to create. All these drawings, again, are going to be both Prismacolor and they're going to be with the pen. And the only reasoning for that is, guess what? I hope you are able to guess the reasoning so that you become better with all of your tools and materials. So in this case, I'm drawing a hidden box. Important, I am still drawing through. You can't really easily visibly see that I'm drawing through the other objects, but the lines are super light. And so I think I said in the last video on the 1-point, if you're a really heavy-handed person, the only solution is that you just have to be able to draw with sensitivity. If you're struggling with that, the only solution is you just have to figure out and just start to practice making straight lines. When you practice the straight lines enough with intention, with purpose, so none of these drawings are autopilot. Later on, your drawings become autopilot, meaning that you can make the marks without having to think about it. But when we're practicing exercises, it's not that much different than when you're playing a sport. You have to practice with intention so that you develop the specific muscle memory and you develop the specific mechanics. So if you're not practicing these things with intention and you're just sort of autopiloting them, then your drawings won't necessarily develop as effective and efficiently as somebody that's practicing with intention. So when you're doing these drawings, you don't have to be mundane about it. So this second one that I'm doing in pen, all I did was I just angled the horizon line. But it's still the same thing. When you angle the horizon line, you still have actually one line. So that vertical line is still going to be, it's going to be still perpendicular to that horizon line. So that's super important, because if your verticals are not perpendicular to your horizon line, you're now having some different perspective other than 2-point perspective. You can do the same thing with 1-point perspective. You can tilt your horizon line and it still be 1-point perspective. So as long as you still have either those parallel and perpendicular lines, you're good. So with this 2-point drawing, just for effect, decided, hey, it might be cool so that if you want to practice flipping or rotating the angle of your horizon line so that you can challenge yourself a little bit, because most of the exercises that you'll do for a lot of perspective classes, they are the typical flat horizon line. But for us, especially illustrators, a lot of times you're doing more dynamic angles. So you're almost, I mean, there's times where you'll draw them fairly flat, but a lot of times you're trying to find like that cool shot, that up shot, that dynamic angle. So practicing, also doing your perspective at varying angles will help you to get better with drawing stuff where you might be at in a more difficult, complex position. So don't make all your exercises just flat horizon lines. So you're able to think beyond just the exercise of perspective, but that you're developing the mechanic and the skill set for potentially more complicated angles, because effectively that's what you'll end up drawing all the time. And again, we're practicing line weights, so it's always going to be, I've got that really light line weight for my converging lines, I've got that heavy line weight for most of the silhouette read, and then I've got the medium line weight for the interior lines. And that's going to be the practice mechanic, whether we're using pins or if we're using Prismacolor. So knock out those drawings.